Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. Ladies and gentlemen, they've all slunk out of their burrows and they're trying to disrupt, disrespect and defame Bharat. There is a crackdown that is also happening, but this entire K gang around the world are on a rampage. From the UK to the United States, to Canada, to Australia. They are out on the streets staging violent protests. First it was London, where the Khalistani protesters vandalized the Indian High Commission and tried to bring down the national flag. Then in Australia, they protested outside Parliament. Next was the United States. The Indian consulate was vandalized in San Francisco. They even tried to barge into the consulate. And now pictures have emerged from Canada's Surrey. The event, which was being conducted to welcome the newly appointed Indian High Commissioner to Canada, was cancelled because of the violent protests outside the venue. They even heckled the Indian diaspora at the event, including certain radio journalists who went there to cover the event. Their passage was blocked, they were abused, heckled, and the cops on ground actually sent the journalists back away, the radio journalists. They sent them back, saying, "We cannot guarantee your safety, so please go away." Bizarre, absolutely bizarre. Now let's focus on each nation one by one and what's happened in that turf. United Kingdom. After pro-Khalistani elements attacked the Indian embassy in London, the Indian High Commissioner interacted with the concerned Indian community leaders at India House. The Indian diaspora also staged a massive protest. It was a show of strength and, of course, a registration of objection for this kind of behavior. And that happened earlier in the day in London. The protesters stood in solidarity with the Indian High Commission after Khalistani elements attacked the Indian mission and demanded action against the culprits. The protesters carried their tricolour in the hand and chanted Bharat Mata Ki Jai. You see these visuals? Just listen in to the Nat sound. And that tricolour still stands. The big mega one put by the Indian High Commission to say, you try and take down one small flag, we'll make the flag so big you won't dare to touch it again. Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and silent show of strength and solidarity that we stand with you. Meanwhile, there was some success for Bharat in the United Kingdom. Avtar Singh Khanda, the man who climbed up the balcony and brought down the Indian flag, has been arrested by the London police. Sources have told CNN News18 that Khanda was behind Amritpal Singh's meteoric rise. Avtar Singh Khanda. Now let us take you through the details about Avtar Singh Khanda. What intel sources are telling CNN News18? He was the organizer of this entire K protest outside the India House in London, close associate of Khalistani terrorist Jagtar Singh Tara, Amritpal's handler and the brain behind his meteoric rise. Avtar Singh Khanda is also close to Babbar Khalsa International's Paramjit Singh Pamma. BKI demonstrated IDs in Birmingham and Glasgow in the United Kingdom. That's the United Kingdom. Let's move to what happened in the US. The NSA, or the NSC coordinator for the strategic communications at White House, John Kirby, has strongly condemned the attack on the Indian consulate in San Francisco and termed it as absolutely unacceptable. This comes after India had lodged protest and reminded the US government of basic obligation to protect diplomats and, of course, facilities. The Ministry of External Affairs had asked the US government to take appropriate steps to prevent such attacks. On Sunday, pro-Khalistani elements had attacked the Indian consulate in San Francisco and they broke open the makeshift security barriers raised by the city police and installed two so-called Khalistani flags inside the consulate premises. Now the US State Department also issued a statement indicating that those behind the act would be held accountable. Let's listen in to what John Kirby had to say.
We certainly condemn that that vandalism. It's just absolutely unacceptable. The State Department's Diplomatic Security Service is working with local authorities. I can't speak for the San Francisco police, but I can say that the Diplomatic Security Service is working with local authorities to properly investigate. And obviously, the State Department is going to be working from an infrastructure perspective to repair the damage, but it's unacceptable.
Meanwhile, over in Canada, a reception organised by the Friends of India and Canada Foundation in Surrey was cancelled after the Khalistani mob started protesting at the venue. The Indian High Commissioner India's High Commissioner in Canada was forced to cancel his attendance as nearly 200 protesters, some wielding swords, gathered in front of the venue, blocking entry into the venue for anyone who wanted to attend the event. Reports suggest that the Surrey police was unable to control the mob which started gathering a couple of hours ahead of the event. And this also happened on Sunday evening, and cops advised the High Commissioner against attending the function. An Indian origin journalist named Sameer Kaushal was heckled by these Khalistani protesters. He was in Surrey to cover the Indian High Commissioner's visit when a pro-Khalistani group threatened and roughed him up, and the cops asked him to actually walk away. They said, "We will escort you back, you sit in our car and we'll take you back to your vehicle because we cannot guarantee you your safety." Joining us now is Terry Milewski. He's the author of Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. He's also a Canadian journalist. Terry, namaste. Thank you very, very much for speaking with us here at CNN News 18. You followed this entire Khalistan project. It's part of your book. How do you see the developments in the last 24 to 48 hours? What's happened in Canada, the United Kingdom, USA and Australia?
Well, precipitated, I guess, by the dramatic chase for Amritpal Singh, which makes news. What has happened, I think, is that it's set fire to the tinder that was lying around in Australia, in Canada, in Germany, in the UK, and certainly in Punjab, thanks to what you might call the power of myth, the power of misinformation. The less polite term is lies. And what I'm talking about is that for many years now, the establishment at certain radical Gurdwaras in the West, among the Sikh diaspora, have been promoting a series of lies about a sort of fantasy world. I don't just mean Khalistan, their imagined independent state, which seems today in practice as remote as ever, but also they've been propagating myths about how the Sikhs are the victims of and I'm quoting now, the ongoing genocide by the Hindus, which has been going on, so they say, since the time of Indira Gandhi right through to the time of Narendra Modi. And these myths and this victim narrative has caught fire in many of the Gurdwaras, and it's attractive to young men who apparently don't have a very good education. It's an indictment of education in many of these places. I mean, people should be able to think more critically about what's happened, and they should be educated about the facts. There were certainly many misdeeds. Let's not go into all the history now, but many misdeeds on both sides. Some 20,000 people and more died during the Sikh armed insurgency for Khalistan in the 80s and the early 90s. Most of those were Sikhs, by the way, something that's often forgotten. And the Khalistanis slaughtered in a series of hideous massacres, both Sikhs and Hindus, with equal abandon. So I think what's happened now, because of the case of Amritpal Singh, and because it coincides with some angry scenes in Australia, which is the latest venue for the referendum, which is being run by so-called Sikhs for Justice, led by Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, the author of the quotes that I just mentioned. He's the author of the quotes that, for example, that Operation Blue Star was a case where 10,000 innocent civilians were herded into the Golden Temple by the Indian Army to be massacred. None of that didn't happen. These figures are wildly exaggerated, and Pannoon is also the author of the naming of the referendum centers dotted around the world after a parade of gun-toting mass murderers to include, for example, the Canada campaign headquarters for the Khalistan referendum campaign is named for, and I quote, Shaheed by Talvinder Singh Parmar. It's his voting center. And he is the poster boy for this peaceful, democratic campaign. They say, oh, we're all about ballots, not bullets. That's another quote from Panoon. Really? Well, he's just contradicted himself and continues to do so. The voting center in Australia most recently was named for, I think, Kawant Singh and Kahar Singh and Satwant Singh, the assassins of Indira Gandhi in October of 1984. So these myths go on, and when an incident like this has happened in Punjab, it catches fire, and compliant politicians in the West, I'm including several Canadian members of Parliament from all parties, are crying in their beer now about the outrage committed, the suspension of human rights by the fascist Indian government. And they don't seem to have a clue about the background to the case. They seem to have completely forgotten all the killings by the Khalistanis and remember only the killings by the Hindus. So it's got a slightly otherworldly air to it. But I think that's what's behind it. Misinformation and myth.
But Terry, do you believe somebody's fueling this propaganda? How does one address it? More importantly, because if you go after the propagandists, it becomes a big issue. If you do nothing about it, they proliferate.
The answer to the why question is it's because it's easy and cheap for Western politicians to court any number of ethnic communities. Canada is a nation of immigrants. We've got lots of different groups. They allow them to proliferate in return to votes, and they look the other way at the Vaisakhi parade every year when the floats go by in the parade carrying the pictures of gun-toting martyrs and assassins, to include the assassins of Indira Gandhi, the assassins of General Vaidya, the Air India bombers, Dilawar Singh, who, as you know, blew up Bayant Singh, the Chief Minister of Punjab in 1995, and on and on and on. There's a long list, as most Indians know, there's a long list of these so-called martyrs. So if you don't understand the history and you're getting a lot of votes from the people in the parade, maybe it makes sense, apparently it does, for many politicians at all levels of government and all parties in Canada certainly, and I think this happens to a degree elsewhere, it makes sense to smile and wave. Thanks for the votes. That's the other question you ask is, what do you do about it? Well, for one thing, you do a better job of education, you do a better job of propaganda. All the propaganda is on one side. Nobody's doing the opposite propaganda. The Indian government has been very quick and energetic over many years now at berating Western governments for letting this happen. Why don't you crack down? You should lock them up. You should crack down. And this must sound pretty tough and good stuff for the voters back home in India. But it's not practical. The Western governments are not going to abolish freedom of speech. I mean, if you think that, then you're a lot less smart than I think these Indian politicians really are. They know perfectly well that's not going to happen, and they know they look good by beating their chests and saying Canada should crack down and send a note of protest and so forth. Well, they need to do a better job of countering the propaganda. Than just saying these slogans every time something happens. Oh, well, arrest them, lock them up. It's not against the law unless they commit any kind of violence. And they need to get that. And instead, to deal with the propaganda in kind by saying, okay, let's just analyze, Twitter's fine for this if you want to fight on Twitter. Let's have a look. Okay, you want to name your campaign headquarters for Talvinder Parmar. Let's look at what this raging psychopath actually did. He slaughtered 331 completely innocent civilians who had nothing whatsoever to do with his dream of Khalistan. And if you're going to propagate the myth that, oh, well, he was never convicted, he was innocent. Yeah, well, number one, it's kind of hard to prosecute and convict a corpse. He was killed 30 years ago by the Indian police. And number two, we had a decade of transparent, open, thorough legal proceedings in Canada to include a 4-year criminal trial and another 4 years in a judicial inquiry under an esteemed former judge of the Supreme Court of Canada, both of which named Parmar as beyond question the instigator and the leader and the mastermind, if that's the word, of the Kanishka bombing, the twin bombings actually in 1985. As you know, there was supposed to be another plane, another Air India flight that was blown up on the other side of the world, and that one went off early on the ground and killed a couple of Japanese baggage handlers. Yeah, killing Japanese baggage handlers. That's really going to win you Khalistan, an independent state of Khalistan. So, in my view, I'm sorry for the long answer, but in my view, India has done a poor job of fighting propaganda with its own propaganda, and it's made do with these slogans about, why does Canada allow this to happen? Well, up until the point they commit an illegal act, an act of violence, it's going to go on.
It's going to go on.
Because it's not against the law.
So if they vandalize, they get pulled up for vandalism. Thanks for putting matters in perspective. But don't you agree, or would you agree if I'd say that the Sikh community at large should also come and distance itself from these incidents, especially the custodians of Sikhi, the religion, the religious heads?
You're quite right to point out the relative silence of the majority of the Sikh community, which wants nothing to do with the separatists. They just let it happen. They don't want to get into a fight. Well, maybe they should.
Fair point made. Terry, thank you very, very much. We'll keep this conversation or pause this conversation for now. I'm going to go across to our other guest, but I thank you for making the time here. Look forward to speaking with you very, very soon. Thank you. Let's go straight across to Kuldeep Singh Shekhawat, Director, MATV, and Wasiq Wasiq, Writer and Commentator. Namaste, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. Wasiq Wasiq, we just heard Terry Milewski, who said that this is nothing but myth and misinformation. And on foreign land, you are not going to expect any crackdown till the time things go out of hand. There is vandalism and there is violence. He believes that India is not doing the right job of countering or enough of countering this negative propaganda of misinformation. Your thoughts?
Yes, so I do think that in terms of the UK security services, when it comes to pro-Khalistani extremism, we've seen that there's been a blind spot. But that has been picked up. It's been picked up most recently in the William Shawcross review on Prevent. Prevent is a counter-extremism strategy that's directed by the government to prevent people from going into radicalization. And what we've seen over recent years is that a number of those, a minority within the Sikh community, believe in the concept of a separate state for Sikhs, which is Khalistan in the region of Punjab. And this annexation of this region is allowing and giving a lot of these people a sense of identity where they don't actually need one. We've seen that Bharat right now is thriving as a nation, and a or a separate state for the Sikhs, I don't see how that would really help. And some of that propaganda that's being used to recruit a lot of these vulnerable and impressionable individuals needs to be countered, not just at a state level, but also within the Sikh community itself. So one of the caveats that we should always point out is that this is not the majority of Sikhs, this is a minority, yes. Because even whenever you do see these attacks, you only see a minority carrying out extremism. You don't see the majority, but you do need to see the majority coming out against them and to show a strong, united front that this is unacceptable behavior and it must be dealt with.
Interestingly, even when they talk about this separate Punjab or Khalistan narrative, they forget about the Punjab that is with Pakistan. They actually draw a map over other states in India like Haryana and Himachal. So this is purely secessionist narrative, and it's fueled by under this entire K2 directive of Kashmir and Khalistan that's pushed by the ISI. Now this is all something which all of us are nodding our heads, we know. But how is it that this propaganda is not there on ground for these people? Even if there are 25 people standing outside the India House in London, Kuldeep Singh ji, it's unfortunate. The fact is that there should have been none. The other thing is, in India we saw outside the British consulate protests in Delhi. But where are the larger voices of the community coming out and saying that none of these boys represent Sikhi? They do not, what they are pushing is a false narrative. This Pannoon and this entire gang and this entire lot which is peddling this K narrative, they have not been totally done away with. Their narrative has not been snubbed.
Well, if you want to understand, as far as what I understand this situation as, the number of people who are involved in this are not too big.
Okay.
The numbers are very small. Maybe around, say, 60 to 100 people altogether if it is UK scenario we are talking about. Out of those 60 or odd people, what has happened is, as you have very rightly pointed out, the K2 scenario. Well, there are certain elements which came to UK and took asylum. They took asylum on the basis of, as they claim, that they will be persecuted in India. Once they are here, they know they cannot go back to India.
Yeah.
And since they cannot go back to India, what they will do? They will start renting against India. That renting is being looked after by so-called ISI or our other powerful friends across on the northern side. Put together, these people are just a nuisance. If you ask people in India, which is you very well know, nobody is demanding Khalistan.
Correct.
As you rightly said, there is another part of Punjab which is in Pakistan. Nobody is talking about that. On top of that, if you really need to speak about separatism, and if you are really looking for a nation of your own, there are ways, means and methods which are legal. They should have adopted them, and they should have gone on record to tell the political hierarchy that, okay, hang on a minute, let's do this. And if the people don't agree or agree, we'll find out. It is something similar to what happened in Scotland recently. Scotland was looking for a referendum. They had a referendum, but the Scottish people lost it. The majority of the Scottish said no. That is the right way of dealing with the things. These 60 odd or 50 odd people living in Birmingham, living in some other parts of UK, majority of them, other than one guy, Paramjit Singh Pamma. Pamma lives in London now. He used to live in Birmingham. And mind you, this guy is a guy who fuels fire all the time. There's another gun. I can name these people because we deal with these people on a daily basis. We know them, who these people are. But honestly speaking, when you come to a scenario whereby British hierarchy and British system and British politicians should have looked at it in a very different way. What we have been told, that the system is telling us that, hang on a minute, they have human rights issue. Well, if they have a human rights issue, they should go to the proper channel. By disrespecting the Indian national flag, going to the Indian High Commission, desecrating the Indian flag, trying to break into the High Commission. There was a guy.
All of that is all right, but the fact is that how is it that even British politicians think it's a human rights issue? How are they so misinformed? That means there is a loss. India has lost the narrative amongst the British polity, Wasiq Wasiq. That's the underlying problem here. If they are getting political patronage and sympathy by spreading misinformation and myth, what is it that has been done by the Sikh community in London, in the United Kingdom, the Indian diaspora, the Indian embassy, and of course India, the External Affairs Ministry, to quell this narrative? That's not happening. Would you agree that's a concern and that needs to be addressed right away?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It does need to be dealt with, and I expect it will be dealt with. It's going to take some time for it to be dealt with, and look, the fact is that Bharat is one of our closest allies, both in terms of trade and in terms of security. And the UK government are going to have to step up and to protect Bharat's interests here, because it seems quite embarrassing now that within the space of 5 years, the Commission has been attacked. The first attack was in 2019, and now we've had the next attack here this year in 2023. So now that's 2 attacks that have taken place. And the local authority, in terms of the police, the Met Police, have failed to protect that. And, serious questions need to be asked why that's happening. Only recently, only today, in fact, a report has just come out damning the Met Police in terms of it being institutionally racist. So we can see that there are serious problems that we're having domestically here within our security services.
Right.
And we need to get a handle on that if we are to obviously deal with such a threat like these. Now, in terms of the Khalistanis, now, just because it's a small number, it doesn't mean that a small number of individuals cannot pose a threat. It only takes one person to blow up a bomb. It only takes one person to stab someone and murder them. And these would, in my view, be considered terrorist attacks.
And it only takes a handful to broad brush an entire community. And that's harmful to the United Kingdom. It's harmful to the entire diaspora present there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing, we know the majority of the diaspora do not agree with this sort of extremism or sentiments towards terrorist activities. There's hardly any support for a Khalistani state, and even if there was, there are, as your guest said, means to achieving that, if that's ever at all possible. So the fact is that this needs to be dealt with, and I do have confidence that we are going to see this more prominently dealt with in the coming weeks.
No, a massive push of facts has to be made, and all these myths and misinformation have to be dispelled at the earliest. Kuldeep Shekhawat and Wasiq Wasiq, thank you very much. Quickly bringing the entire aspect closer, ladies and gentlemen, as Terry